Um, so today I will be focusing on the role of neurofeedback therapy in a multimodal trauma intervention. But before I start, I wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather here today, the Cabrogal people of the Darug Nation, and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I also, want to reflect on the fact that uh, the, that today we're here to talk about the brain and its adapt to heal and connect and recognize that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have for tens and thousands of years held deep knowledge of rhythmic regulation, connection, and healing, knowledge that speaks directly to the work we do here in understanding the nervous system and promoting healing. So, today, the case that I'll be taking you through will aim to explore how neurofeedback therapy facilitated emotional regulation and how then that enhanced the effectiveness of other modalities that I've employed. I'll go through the background information of my client, but before I start, I just want to note that factual information for my client, who I'll refer to her as Anna, has been changed to protect her privacy. This is a genogram, a very small part of a very big genogram. So she comes from a very large family. My client was born in Australia. However, her mother and father arrived as refugees from Syria on the 2nd of January 2001. She's second generation refugee. She comes from a minority ethnic group of Christian faith. Um, she comes, as I said, from a large family, and a lot of her family are still overseas and in various countries. So just something to note that will come up is that her paternal uncle, um, his daughters, and her family all grew up together, but later on, paternal uncle, his wife, and children migrated to live in Europe. And her cousins, who she refers to as sisters, they're a lot older than she is. Um, Her father passed away in 2011. She was referred to STARTS 19th of March 2001. And in STARTS, we have this system where there's the counseling team, and then the counseling team can then refer clients to our neurofeedback program, the appropriate clients. And so she was referred to our program on the 20th of June 2023. I'll take you briefly through her history. So she was born in Australia. There was a lot of family conflict going up between the age of 0 to 6. She reports domestic violence perpetrated by her father towards her mother, mostly verbal abuse. However, there was also financial and psychological abuse that went alongside of that. When she was 6 years old, her father passed away. She knew he was ill, but was made to believe that he was only slightly ill. So she reports experienced a lot of shock at the news of his death. When she was 10 years old, she was sexually assaulted by someone that the family had known and trusted. This um, was then disclosed 2 years later to a health professional. JIPR, Jode at the time, was involved and investigated. However, it was never substantiated. She is quite regretful for reporting it late, and she held a lot of regret with that. When she was 11 years old, she was with her mother, brother, and sister in Turkey when the terrorist bombing attack happened. And she reports the shock, witnessing the shock in her mum's face and how her mum had changed in that moment. When she was 12 to 15, so as she was entering high school, there was a lot of bullying that was happening at school, um, mostly due to her race, and that sort of led her to change from one school to the next. The final school for year 11 and 12, there was no reported bullying there. And when she was 13 years old, she was locked by her cousin in a room when she was visiting her, one of the cousins that I'd mentioned earlier that she was close with and grew up with. And this cousin um, uh, took her phone, put her in that room and didn't let her leave for the 2-week period that she was there. She also limited her food intake. Anna was terrified. And then she came back home and reported that to her mother. I should also note, so with the being locked by her in a room by her cousin, as well as the sexual assault, when she disclosed this, her mother believed her and responded in those disclosures straight away. So at STARTS, we use the complex interaction model to guide assessment and treatment by looking at how trauma, family, culture, and the environment shapes a person's well-being. For Anna, there's the intergenerational trauma that plays a huge role. Her family still faces danger overseas. She's always hearing phone calls coming to her mother about relatives experiencing violence and even death. Um, Here, we're looking at, her having to change schools several times for experiencing bullying due to her race, being called an Arab by her peers, and in one of those where it was an actual physical abuse incident outside the school. And then we also look at the normal life cycle where she is entering adolescence. She's facing illness, loss, conflict, and financial hardship in her family. This model is great because it also helps us reflect on the protective factors. So some of the internal protective factors include Anna's resilience, intelligence. She's reflective and curious, and she has a good sense of humor and is always eager to connect to others. Um, and some of the external include her close relationship with her maternal grandmother, as well as her maternal aunt, as well as she's part of a friendship group that is a long-term friendship group that's since she arrived to Australia, she was part of. So at the time of the referral, she was presenting with the following symptoms. She had nightmares that were happening about 2 to 3 times a week. She was having problems falling asleep. It was taking her about 2 to 3 hours to be able to fall asleep. She was having tension headaches that she's put down to anxiety, and her GP ruled out any medical concerns. She was experiencing intrusive images of spiders crawling up the wall and sometimes on her arm. And she was aware that these images were not real at the time of her experiencing it. However, she was very distressed at experiencing them. She had eating concerns, so she was seeing a dietitian at the time, but she wasn't going with what was being recommended. She was having one meal a day. She wasn't happy with her body image. She was also experimenting with cannabis use for self-regulation. So she was mostly before exams and before music performance. It was a very new thing that she'd started at the time that she was referred. She was she was experiencing complicated grief and loss and attachment disruptions. Mostly there was a lot of triangulation that was happening within her family dynamic. And as she entered adolescence, those roles started to become more defined. And she was struggling academically and was contemplating dropping out, even though she knew that she was very capable to perform, but because of the anxiety that she was experiencing before exams and then her performance during exams, she was contemplating dropping out. So the agreed goals then were to better overall regulation and state of vigilance, to address the nightmares, to address the problems falling asleep, to address the intrusive images, and to also address the tension headaches. So at STARTS, we've been using the TOVA assessment since 2003, and for our neurofeedback team, it's one of the staple assessments that we use with children and adolescents. It's a real-time brain function test that objectively measures a person's attention and inhibitory control as well. So one of the most important measures of the response time of the TOVA assessment is response time variability, which is how consistently she is responding across the test. And it also helps give us an indication about how stable this nervous system is and how it can adapt to different needs that the environment is putting on it. What we see here for Anna is that Her commission errors, which is an indication of impulsivity, was the lowest score across all the tests, which indicates that she was impulsive. But also, when we look at this from a clinical lens, we see that response time is really high, which response time is a measure of speed. But clinically, when we match it with her symptoms, we see that it's a possible indication of that she is anxious, so she is impulsive. Another staple assessment that we use at START is our EEG assessment. It's a non-invasive test that measures the electrical activity of the brain. So 19 sensors are placed across different regions of the brain, front to back, side to side. And yeah, so the activity of the brain, is it underactive, is it active, is it overactive, is measured across all of these regions. So what we see here is that there is an increased activity in the front center of the brain, which suggests that she's having difficulty with inhibitory control. So feelings of drowsiness, difficulty shifting attention, regulating mood. We see that consistent with the TOVA assessment. Also, we could see that there's an increased slow brain activity in the center, which is suggestive of, so right here, which is suggestive that she's struggling to stay alert. So she could feel spacey, disconnected, and problem with focus and decision making. There is also higher activity in the center of the brain, which is here, which shows that she could be struggling with the mirror neuron system. What that means is that she's struggling with recognizing emotion, feeling confident within social situation, and understanding others. And higher activity at the back of the brain here, we could see higher, it's all over, a lot of slow as well as a lot of fast, which shows that she could be experiencing problems staying calm and problems with sensory integration as well as memory. The challenges with anxiety that I mentioned earlier with the TOVA assessment is consistent with this finding. So, what is neurofeedback? Neurofeedback is a non-invasive brain training method that helps people learn to regulate their brain activity. So, it's based on the idea that the brain can change its own pattern when it receives real-time feedback about what it's doing. This is one of my favorite images because it shows how neurofeedback gives the individual a mirror into its own brain, an image that the brain can understand and therefore can shift its patterns here. So at START, we don't use neurofeedback alone. We use it within a therapeutic environment and along other therapeutic modalities. This is where the sensors are placed and information goes to our computer and then reward is given to the client's screen. So EEG sensors, again, as I said earlier, are placed on the individual, and the signal is then sent to the therapist's screen, where it's analyzed moment to moment. There's underactive, active, overactive signals. And on the client screen, feedback of sound, light, and visuals is given, like a movie or a game that is that moves easily. When the brain is producing healthy, balanced activity, this positive feedback is occurring. So the game is appearing more smoothly. The screen is looking wider. When undesirable patterns like linked to anxiety or inattention, then the screen might appear a bit smaller. It might pause a little bit. Over time, the brain learns to stay in a healthy pattern on it, to exhibit a healthier pattern on its own, just like a new skill. So, like I said earlier, at STARTS, we practice attuned neurofeedback. Anna engaged quickly in therapy. She had a really good therapeutic relationship beforehand with her previous therapist in the counseling team. So it wasn't hard to build on that when she came into our neurofeedback team. She, both me and the previous therapist had attempted to engage mum in a session, but she declined for both of us. So that was a request that Anna had made, but unfortunately weren't able to bring that to our sessions. And so neurofeedback was the main modality that I used with Anna. It was 20 sessions, 2 times a week, targeting the left and the right temporal lobes, and its aim was to help regulate Anna's nervous system. The session, I'll take you through the structure. So she would come in as I'm setting her up with the sensors. I'm doing a quick check-in and seeing how the last day or couple of days had gone, and linking it to the goals that we're focusing on. And then following neurofeedback, about 15 to 20 minutes, then we would do counseling. So other therapeutic modalities that I used alongside of it included attachment therapy, compassion focused therapy, IFS, and some elements of CBT. I'll take you through the first session with Anna because that was very striking for me. So she, after neurofeedback, which was a very brief neurofeedback session, she started to mention being locked in that room by her cousin. Except this time to her narrative, she'd added that there was spiders in the wall, in the corner of the room. Um, and then the next session when she came in, again, we trained for neurofeedback. And what then she had realized was that it was the same spiders that she was seeing in her intrusive images. There later on, she then started to identify it wasn't that she was feeling anxious, so she was getting the intrusive thoughts. It was that she was actually feeling unsafe in that space, and that is why she was experiencing the intrusive images of the spiders. So following that realization and really that session, she didn't experience those intrusive images anymore. Some of my sessions with her also were highly focused on attachment focus work, really due to the complicated grief related to the loss of her father and the shift in the relationship that she has with her mother. She then started with attachment work. She started to notice that, when she's in conversations with people, she may lie and say things that are not true. And then she started to recognize that this was due to feeling emotionally threatened by them, by her feeling not seen by them, and needing to amplify her response so she could feel seen. Um, and then during later sessions, she would choose hugging symbols to reflect the connection that she needed as a child, but also the connection that she needed during moments of conflict that she was experiencing within her family. Um, Later on in the sessions, she started to explore and to process the sexual assault. And some of it was around her feeling um, threatened when she was receiving attention from boys. That then started to shift, and she started to recognize that she was no longer threatened by that, and that she began to express a self-acceptance for herself and saying things like, "I've noticed that I actually look beautiful," or "I actually like looking at myself in the mirror now." So these are some of the sessions that we had unpacked. I'll quickly take you through the post assessments. What we can see here in the chart is that response time variability had changed. So 8-point significance is what is considered clinically significant for the TOVA assessment. We see here a 21 point increase. Um, as a clinician, what I see there is a more stable nervous system. We see a drop in response time. Again, from a clinical lens, I see a drop in anxiety. Large improvement in impulsivity here in that commission error, and a more stable nervous system overall. That is also seen in her EEG. So, before there was a lot of slow, and as I showed also, there was a lot of fast. The underactive and overactive brain was starting to become a more stable brain, a more alert and present, less hypervigilant brain, which as a result then has better sleep, better functioning, better mood, and better memory ability. And an increase in that back part of the brain shows that that there is a more stable affect and regulation overall. So therapeutic outcomes, I'll quickly take you through that. Better sleep and nightmare happened once neurofeedback was started. That was achieved very quickly. Coherent trauma narrative. She started to refer about trauma in the past tense. And it started to become more coherent and more details started to come through as she would share. And so the story started to, um, it wasn't the same narrative that she was sharing previously with the previous therapist. Um, she started to adhere better to skills that she'd learned from her previous therapist, from the dietitian, as well as the skills that she was learning with me in therapy. She's My favorite part was she started to refer to herself as beautiful, and she started to show a genuine satisfaction to her self-image. Um, Reduction in reactivity to the environmental and emotional triggers that she was facing, because there was still a lot of um, concerns within that relationship at home, mostly between her and her mother. However, what shifted is her relationship with her brother and sister that started to become more richer, and she started to rely on that attachment she has towards her maternal aunt and maternal grandmother. And she ended up achieving her HSC result that she wanted and ended up entering the law degree of her choice, which was she was very happy about. I don't have time to go over this, but this is just, I thought it would be helpful to have more specific disorders and where neurofeedback is in relation to evidence strength. Neurofeedback has existed for over 50 years, but only in the last 10 years did the research really start to develop. And this is where we're at with those specific disorders. What I don't have there is ADHD and autism, which again, I didn't feel like it was linked to this case, but um, research there is growing and amazingly growing, actually. This is our team. We have 4 others here that aren't displayed in the picture for new members. Please visit our website. We have neurofeedback training if you're interested, HRV training, EEG clinic, mentoring, and we're always open for research partnership. We also have some amazing free resources there too. And this is just my reference list. Thank you.